All right. Welcome back, everybody. Hope everybody is well. Uh, Excited about the second session of the learning series on youth-led programs. So glad to see so many of you on and back. Appreciate the word that you got out as well. We have quite a few people registered for this session, so they'll be hopefully be jumping on soon. So as I said, I'm going to go kind of slow in the beginning, but I promise you we'll be out of here on time. So my name is Karen Lackey, and I am the Director of Prevention Services for the ASC of the Western Reserve. And I am here today with all of the same peeps that were on with me last time. I'm from the Connect CLE, the Regional Learning Collaborative for Northeast Ohio. Let me introduce the people you will see later. They're not going to jump on right now, but Holly Jacobson is with us again. She is the YLP coordinator for Geauga County. Adam Fletcher is here from the good old state of Washington with Free Child Institute. And I always want to say Adam Sandler because I love Adam Sandler. Now you're close to being as funny as him, but not all the way there. Kaylee Klepper, who is our student rep, and she's here to give the student perspective, and she's a 2019 graduate of our Youth Advisory Council. And then Jenny Canganelli, and she is the RLC coordinator, the Connect CLE coordinator, so a lot of you know her as well. So what I want to do is just take a couple minutes and review our last session. So I think one of the key things we did last time is Adam really hit home the idea of empowerment. Empowerment is a key concept in youth-led programs, and especially as it's used in the Ohio definition, which is giving young people the ability to affect change in the social and political systems that impact their life. I mean, that's a pretty big order. So I think that was a huge thing we did. The other thing Kaylee did, which I like, and she's going to do a little bit again today, is she brings a youth perspective in, and she talked a little bit about how youth-led programs are different than any of the other experiences young people have in leadership clubs, leadership at school, or leadership in the community. And then lastly, we just scratched the surface on what the difference is between an adult ally and a typical leadership advisor, or maybe even a champion. You know, Adam touched on the difference between champion and ally. It's a difference and sounds fine, but it's really not once you see youth-led in practice. So by the end of this series, you all will have the process, the tools, and the approaches necessary to really empower young people with this unique approach that is successful not only in creating lasting change in the individual students, but also in the schools and communities they work with. It's a powerful program, and it's very exciting. So today's session, I am going to set up by introducing our first steps, what we do to get started, and that's creating an environment, an empowering environment for young people. So Holly's going to take a part of that, Adam's going to take a part of that, and Kaylee's going to take a part of that. But what I want to do is give you all a few examples in our region and surrounding regions of the type of settings that I've seen youth-led programs successful in. And when I say successful, what I mean is there was a group of young people who engaged in a strategic planning process of 1 year or longer to design, develop, and implement activities to address a major problem in their life. We're going to talk a little bit about what those things were in the future and the outcomes they had, but I just wanted to concentrate on the settings real quick. So imagine this. The first setting is a residential treatment center in East Cleveland, Ohio. They had a successful program. Another one in Northeast Ohio is our Career Center, which serves 15 very different school districts, all these students coming together at the Career Center for an experience. They had a group. We have seen several middle school groups, which a lot of people go, wow, middle schoolers can strategically plan. It really has been amazing. And also a community-based group where 5 different school districts sent representatives. These kids have never met each other before, and they had a phenomenally successful project. And then lastly, one of my favorite is we partner with, one of our partners is in Columbus, for those of you on in the Columbus area, and a phenomenally successful program in a recreation center on the south side of Columbus. So imagine those various settings and the things that we all are going to try to learn together to make sure any youth-led program we do is successful. So just to let you know, the process works when it's done well, and it works in every setting I have ever seen it tried in. So where we're going from here. is in the next session, what we're going to do is we are going to give you then the tools and the framework and the processes. So the more structural stuff is going to come next time. But you'll see a lot of the language you hear today, you're going to see influxed in all of the tools and that we talk about. You're also going to see some of the outcomes. And then you're also going to get to see one of the most important things is how to get young people, give them the skills and the knowledge that they need to participate in this kind of environment, because not every young person walks in being ready, to be in a collaborative environment like this. So just as a side note, you hear me say the word process a lot. You probably hear Adam, Jenny, and Kaylee, everybody say it a lot. In youth led, when we talk about the process, we engage young people in our process. We stay true to the process. We trust the process, but please understand this is not a linear process. When we say process, the things we do and we talk about, it happens constantly. And you'll see that in the tools a little bit next time, but you're engaging the process when you welcome a new student into a group. You're engaging the process when you run into a challenge. You're engaging the process when an activity isn't as successful as they hope. So that's one thing in the back of your head when you're thinking of youth led. The process is not linear. So I hope you stay connected because you're getting the basics with Connect CLE, or if you're in some other region, please find your regional learning collaborative. And also at the end of this program on the slide, we're also going to add the Ohio Youth Led Prevention Network contact information as well. They're a great source for trainings, for more information and to get your head around this kind of stuff. So finally, I know that we are all Zoom weary. So we're going to stay to 45 minutes. We're going to be active and we're going to have a little bit of fun. So I need you to do a few things. One, get out a piece of paper and pencil. Remember, we like to keep you active. Jot some notes, put your responses down. Second, use that chat box liberally. We want everybody, if there's something that says throw it in the chat box, please try to throw it in the chat box. It'll help with your process and the activities as well. And then finally, get out one piece of blank scrap paper that you have no emotional attachment to, and we'll talk about how you're going to use that one later. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Adam Fletcher, and he's going to start off with the power of inclusion and diversity.
Thanks, Karen. Yep. It's exciting to be here, and I want to thank all my friends with the CLE to really for stepping up and doing this powerful work. Youth led in Ohio is so inspiring. In my work around the country and around the world, it's just fascinating to see the depth and breadth of what's happening there in Ohio and to really feel the impact of it. And you all are coming into that front end of it. So it's really exciting to share this time with you today. I'm going to talk about for a little while the power of inclusion and diversity in working with the young people that we do, especially in any youth-led work, because young people today are more diverse in so many more ways than they ever have been before. So when we think about diversity, there are the obvious kinds of diversity, the ones that you're all used to hearing already: racial diversity, religious diversity, cultural diversity, language diversity. But there are also types of diversity that aren't so visible and that really form the nexus of a lot of young people's self-identity. In my research on young people around the country, what I've continually discovered is that those identities are more important to them than their self-identity is a lot more important to them than a lot of identities that are assigned to them or acknowledged in their schools and in their communities. For young people of color, of course, their racial identity is first and foremost in a lot of their minds and a lot of the ways that they function. But for the sake of youth-led, we're not just talking about racial diversity. Instead, we're also talking about things that we can't see so obviously. And in addition to racial diversity, we can also think about gender diversity. We can also think about hair color and eye color. But what are the things that we can't see? Sometimes it helps to envision an iceberg. So the first thing that I would like you to draw on your piece of paper right in front of you is just an iceberg. Remember that they're long and weird looking, and draw that water line so that about 2/3 of the iceberg is underwater. On the top of that, in the top space of that iceberg, write down all the ways that you can see diversity. You just get 30 seconds, so go really fast. You might write down racial diversity, you might write down gender, you might write down shoe size, all the ways that you could see diversity. You have about 20 seconds. You have about 10 seconds. Visible diversity. 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Now check this out. On the bottom part of that iceberg, the reason why we put 2/3 of it underwater is that there's so much diversity that we can't see, that is invisible when we're using our eyes. But when we're using our hearts and when we're using our minds, and when we're using our feelings, we can start to understand that diversity is much more than what we see. So what I'd like you to do in the bottom part of that iceberg is brainstorm all the ways that diversity exists below the waterline, all the invisible diversity within among our young people within our communities. You might think about educational ability. You might think about mental health. You might think about friends, creative abilities, athletic knowledge, anything that goes below the line. What kinds of diversity are among young people that we can't see? If you think of more above the line, that's great. Write those down too. Clothing, hairstyles. You have about 30 seconds. Put as many words as you can think of inside that iceberg. All right, 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's not a test. If you didn't get a bunch, that's fine. If you got a bunch, that's fine too. What I would like everybody to do is take your paper and hold it up to your camera so that everybody else can see your icebergs. Take your paper and hold it up to the camera so everybody can see your iceberg. Everybody do that real quick. If you have your screen on big view, there's a couple of, that's great. That's exactly what I want to see. All right, and then take your chat button and everybody drop one of those examples, one of those types of either visual or invisible diversity into the chat. Just write one in there. Somebody wrote socioeconomic, love, life experiences, feelings, norms, social norms, hate, family background, cultural, family traditions, fears, perceptions of life, social groups, parents' accessibility, culture, self-expression. These are awesome. Thank you all so much. So you understand this diversity. You understand the visible and the invisible. Keep on typing those in and we'll come back to them later. Those are really great examples that you folks wrote in there. Thank you for that. What I want us to do, though, is begin to shift from how diversity exists in our world to what we do with it, because youth-led requires that we do something with that diversity. So for our second activity, I want you to take and draw a square, a big square on your page. So if you're using a full page of paper, you might draw it across the full page of paper. If you're using a half page, draw it on a half page, but write a square on your paper. Okay, inside that square, I want you to put 2 lines in order to make a quadrants on your page. So your page should look like this, or your square should look like this when you're done. Not a test, you don't have to make perfectly straight lines. Just draw a box with 2 lines on the inside. All right, what I would like you to do is at the top of the box in the middle, write the word convenient. At the top of the box in the middle, write the word convenient on the outside of the box. If you already wrote on the inside, that's okay. Write on the outside of the box. On the bottom of the box in the middle, write the word inconvenient. So it'll look approximately like that. Inconvenient. You don't have to use my sloppy handwriting. You can use your own. Or you can use nice handwriting, whatever you got. Now on the left side of the box, on the outside in the middle, I want you to write the word traditional. On the left side of the box, on the outside, I want you to write the word traditional. And then on the right side of the box, in the middle, I want you to write the word non-traditional. Non-traditional. Whoops. All right, sloppy handwriting and all. Now I want you to set that box aside for just a second. We're going to come back to it in just a minute. Think about all of the ways that you know youth voice can be heard. Now, we talked about this a little bit last week. Youth voice is any expression of young people, anywhere, anytime, for any reason. It can be the young person who puts on a suit and tie and presents their research findings to the school board on why the school times need to change. But it can also be the kid who runs out into the hallway after class with a Sharpie marker and writes on the wall, "Mrs. Jones sucks." That's not the type of youth voice that we want to hear, but it's still being shared. It's not the way that we want them to express it, but it's still being shared. What I want you to do on a different piece of paper on a different part of your page is brainstorm all the ways that you can imagine youth voice being shared. There's no wrong answer here. What are all the ways that youth voice can be shared? If it helps your brain, go back to that iceberg and look at that diversity. What are ways that those voices get shared? The ones underneath the line. Take just 30 seconds and write down as many ways that youth voice can be shared as you can think of. There's no wrong answer here. Now, these ways should reflect that diversity, if you can think of that. So how would a young person who has strong feelings and needs to express those feelings, how do they share youth voice? How is a young person who lives in a religious community with only other religious people, how do they share their voice? Any expression of any young person, anywhere, about anything at any time. If a young person is growing up in an inner city community and it's rough and hard and they're struggling every day, how do they share their voice? They still have a voice. The question is whether or not we're hearing it. All right. In the chat, you can keep going if you want to. You can stop if you want to. Either way. There you go. Drop some examples of ways youth voice is shared. Music and clothing, dress and hair, art, perfect example, volunteering, public art, graffiti, siblings, youth media, clubs and activities, social media, spoken word, writing, poetry, social media. Wow, that's a common one. Rebellion, writing, school newsletters, religious practice. Think more about rebellion. What else goes into that? What are some ways that youth are sharing their voices that are really hard to hear? Religious practice, prayer, graffiti. Is fighting an example of youth voice? Breaking the law? Yelling at other people? Being withdrawn? Emotionally withdrawing? Socially withdrawing? Is cell phone use an example? Whoa, careful, Adam. Is cell phone use an example of youth voice? Am I saying something when I have my phone in front of me all of the time? And if I am saying something, not literally, but figuratively, what am I saying? Texting, the tone of voice. Marlo says for sure. Yeah, totally. Disconnection, protesting, perfect example of youth voice. So youth voice is all over the place. It reflects this diversity. It can be a challenge, and I will speak to my experience. I've been doing youth work for 30 years. And as a white heterosexual male in America today, it can be hard for me to hear young people of color speak, share their voice, especially in ways that I don't hear. So it's one thing for a kid to put on a suit and tie and present in front of the school board, and that just might be a great way for me to listen to them. But if they don't show up to my programs over and over, are they saying something with their voices? Is attendance youth voice? Is participation youth voice? But then there are other ways that young people are sharing their voices. Now check this out. What I want you to do is go back to those quadrants. That's right, that box that you made with the 4 boxes inside of it, those are quadrants. And what we've done is we've identified 4 ways that young people's voices are heard. One way are convenient traditional ways. What are the convenient and traditional ways that youth voice is expressed? Now, convenient for adults, traditional from our history, from what we know. So school newspapers might be a convenient and traditional way that youth voice gets shared. Make sense? Now, in the opposite corner, we have inconvenient and non-traditional ways that youth voice gets shared. Woo, this could get hard, because an inconvenient way for youth voice for me to hear it is, I don't know, texting the answers to the test underneath the desk. Oh, wow, that went fast. All right, so what I want you to do is take those examples of youth voice and drop them into each corner. You have 4 different boxes. You have traditional and inconvenient, we have convenient and non-traditional. And take those types of youth voice and put them into each box, separate them, and figure out where exactly they go. From that, we can begin to see diverse ways to engage youth voice. There are more ways, but I suspect that you already know what they are. And by doing this, you begin to see how that happens. Now, what's important is that we consider how we listen to youth voice when we're recruiting, retaining, and working with youth-led groups. This is all about group process. This is about how we facilitate activities. It's also about group cohesion and that sense of belonging that we want to foster in young people in our programs. Our youth-led activities need to reflect those different ways and those different types of voices, if only to give us a practical way to really start to see how to implement diversity in a meaningful and structured sense. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Holly, and Holly's going to talk to us a little bit about setting the tone for recruiting with young people. But before I do, I just want to touch base really quick on the idea of the Youth Empowerment Conceptual Framework, YECF. The whole point that I want you to think about the Youth Empowerment Conceptual Framework is that there is a process, there are ways that we go about creating youth-led and fostering it. And you're going to learn more about those later on, but I just want to drop that phrase into your ear, and I'll put it into the chat so you can write it down if you didn't. But we need to begin to consider there's a process for engagement, there's a process for building that group cohesion, and there's a process for the process, and it's really exciting. Let me hand it over to Holly. Thanks, Holly.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. And yes, you are correct. There is a process for the process for the process. There's processes everywhere. Like Karen said, that's something that we use all the time, especially if anybody has worked with, OU and Jessica Calora, you got to trust the process. And that's really, you just got to trust it. We got to do it. So with that and with trusting the process, right? So Adam just talked to us about all the different types of diversity. So there isn't just the visual, there's the things that we can't see that make people diverse as well, right? So before we get started in figuring out how do we use that diversity to our advantage, how do we recruit students from all different areas, I actually am going to throw a poll question up here, and I want you guys to tell me what you find to be challenging for you. So there's a couple things we have. Is it challenging to recruit young people? Recruiting them year after year, getting them on board, new students throughout the year. Is it challenging to retain the group, right? Having consistent attendance, having, your students, once they're involved, are they continually coming year after year, week after week, however long you have them? Group cohesion, right? So Adam also mentioned group cohesion, how do we connect these diverse students together? Or do you have a challenge with building meaningful relationships? So we are gonna throw this up here, and I'm gonna give you guys a couple seconds to go ahead and answer what you find challenging. And you can answer more than one. Awesome. All right, we're gonna give you guys a couple more seconds. All right, so I have to say that this is not really quite surprising, but one of the things that we do here, especially as a, Connect CLE and as an RLC leader, is we hear a lot of people say, we have such a hard time recruiting students. And it appears that 78% of you agreed with that. Like, recruiting students, how do we get young people involved? How do we get them here? And then once we do that, how do we actually keep them involved? How do we retain them? And it looks like 74% of people also dealt with some struggles in retaining students as well. And then we had about 26% of people say group cohesion and how do we connect all these different diverse students together. And great news, building meaningful relationships does not seem to be a super challenge for anybody. So that is awesome. Perfect. All right, so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna share with you really quickly some of those things that we use as recruiting messages. So one thing that I really like to do when I go in and talk to young people, one of the biggest things that I see for recruiting is I think the first most important thing is you have to find the right person to have in there to have recruit. You need to talk directly to the students. A lot of times, I would say when we first started off this work, one of the things that we did is we would go to the counselors or the principal or the teachers and say, hey, we need some students for this, youth-led group. And we would get the top of the top of the top student leaders, and we were missing an entire group of people. And so what we did is we started recruiting directly to the young people. Instead of going to the adults in the building, we went to the students, and we want to know from them, what are they saying that they want to see change? What are their experiences? And talking to them directly. So when I go in, I really just kind of lay it out there. I tell the young people, I say, first I want to know, what is something that you, as a young person today, want to see change in your school or your community? What do you want to see different? How many of you have ever been told by an adult what problems you're facing, right? A lot of times young people get told, this is your problem. You're doing social media too much. You're doing this too much. But that may not be what the young people are facing. And who knows better than them? So I want to hear from you as a young person what you're experiencing, and I want to help you change that. One of the other things that we say is, here's the deal. And this sometimes freaks out the schools, but that's okay. One of the things that I tell them is, here's the thing. You guys are the boss. You guys are the ones making decisions. You guys are the ones that are picking the initiatives. You guys are doing all of this. And I am here as the adult to help support you. But you as the young people are going to make the change. And here's the other thing. I don't care if you are failing school. You could literally be failing every class in here. And I don't care. I don't care about your reputation. I don't care about your background. I don't care about your history. I don't care if you gotten in trouble for something. I don't care about that. What I care about is that you want to make a difference, and I want to help you do that. And that's really what we try to say and do when we go in and recruit our young people. It's not about us, it's about them and what they're experiencing, and how do we help them make those changes, right? And so we really try to use that in the recruiting process. The other thing is, like, again, when we say, when I tell students, I don't care what your grades are, you should see the looks on their faces. Also the faces of the teacher, the principal, whoever's in there. They're like, wait, what? Yeah, that's the case. I want students that are super diverse, not just academically great, but I want students all over the place. I want students who have those unseen diversities. So we really try to recruit from there. The other big thing, again, like I said, we kind of freak out administration, is really working with administration, letting them know ahead of time kind of what you're gonna say and what the real purpose of recruiting is and what the real purpose of youth-led is. Youth-led is not the top of the top of the top of the top leaders. It is every student who has a voice, who wants to be empowered to create change, right? And then again, choosing the right messenger. We need an ally. We need an adult ally in there, not just a champion, right? So I know Adam talked about this last time. A champion is somebody who supports youth-led, and yeah, they support students, but they don't necessarily have a relationship with that student, right? An adult ally has a meaningful relationship. They know that student, they understand them, and they can help them through this process. They really engage with that young person. So those are kind of our really quick tips on how to recruit young people. And so once we get this recruitment, so typically what we do is we get all these youth recruited, and then we bring them in for a full day training, a full day youth-led training where we do the SPIF and we talk about YCF and we do all of these things and talk about the process. And so what we're going to do now is Jenny is actually going to run you through one of the very first things that we start to do with these young people and identifying like what the problem of focus is, right? So Jenny, I'm gonna go ahead and send it on to you.
Thanks, Holly. Well, hello again, everyone. Welcome back. I want to make sure we stay on time. So I'm going to run you through an activity real quick that we do with our young people, typically at that first all-day training. It's a super fun activity. It gets them involved. It gets them laughing. It gives them a voice. And we call it a snowball fight. So what I want everyone to do now is on that blank piece of paper that you have no emotional attachment to, as Karen said in the beginning, I want you to answer this question. What do you think is the most serious, most important problem that young people face today or are dealing with today? And just write that down on that piece of paper, okay? And after you write it down, I'm going to give you a second to write it down. Whatever you think is the most serious problem that young people face today, you're going to write it down on that piece of paper, and then, and I think we all need a little stress relief, you're going to crumple it like a snowball. And then you're going to toss it at your computer screen. And then you're going to toss it again at your computer screen. Because I don't know about you guys, but I'm really tired of staring at myself and my computer screen. Okay? So now we've had our snowball fight. Now, typically I can hear a bunch of kids laughing. There's paper flying everywhere. So this is really hard to just hear myself doing this. But what I want you guys to do now, I'm going to give you a couple seconds. Open up that piece of paper and type in the chat box what that was that you wrote down. Okay, we'll just take a couple seconds. Okay, so I'm seeing fear of failure, effects of trauma, mental health, adult apathy, lack of self-belief, mental health. Very good, very good. Pressure from adults. Belief. Oh, sorry, Marlo. I should have corrected that. Okay. Yeah, lack of purpose. So here's the thing. When we do this in a group with our young people, we process this one of a couple ways. Typically, we just have a full-blown snowball fight. And then we ask them to get in a circle. They pick up whatever piece of paper they picked. We ask them not to read their own. They read what the problem is. The difference is we ask young people, if you could change one thing in your school or community that you think is the biggest problem, what would that be? And that's what we ask them to write down on their paper. So you can imagine, just given the varied responses I'm seeing today, they're going to have a lot of different answers to that. A lot of different problems depending on what the school is they go to or what their community looks like. All right. So when we're talking, like Holly was talking about, once we recruit, you really need to build that group cohesion. And this snowball fight is a great way to start that. Because what we find is we have all these diverse groups of students, these students that are your non-traditional leaders, coming together with more traditional leaders, and they're looking around the room and they're realizing, wow, we worry about the same things. That's the same problem I would like to see change in my school or community, okay? But here's the thing we often notice. When we ask adults the problems they think young people face, those are really different than when you ask a young person the biggest problems they see and that they want to change in their school and community. So our job as adult allies is to listen and support the problems that these young people are seeing that they want to make a change in their school and community. It gives them a voice. It builds that group cohesion, and they're having fun while doing it. So if you're ever in need of a great group cohesion building fun activity, the snowball fight is a great way to get ideas out there, because the bottom line is we take then all of those things they wrote on their snowballs and we discuss them and we narrow it down to this is the problem they want to work on in their school or community. Okay, and so then that just goes to building that group cohesion, giving them a voice, they're having fun, and then hopefully we'll be able to retain them, because they're all working towards the same problem, the same goal, no matter where they come from, no matter if they're traditional, non-traditional types of leaders. And then Holly's going to talk a little bit more to wrap things up on our end with retention. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenny. Yeah. So here's the deal. So once we, we recruit those students, then we bring them in. Like I said, we start this this full day training. This is one of the activities we start. And one of the things that we really notice is like, how do we get young people to stay involved? How do we get them, once we get them in, we get them excited. The first thing is we bring them in and we get them excited. The second thing is, how do we maintain that retention, right? So with the Snowball Fight, what we're able to see is we actually can see that we have young people who now start to realize, hey, I'm in this social group, you're in that social group, and there's a bunch of different people with a bunch of different backgrounds and experiences, but we're all kind of experiencing the same thing. So, for example, we had a school that there was a major concern about an issue, and this was a very, very diverse group. And some of these students had never even talked to each other before. And they were like, wait, you experienced that? We experienced that. And so it really started to build this unity and this group cohesion of like, oh, that's interesting. We're all kind of experiencing the same thing. So that we found is really helpful in retention is getting them to understand that you guys are all on the same page. You just might have different experiences, different backgrounds, different diversities. The next thing is building a positive relationship. It is so important to have a positive relationship with those young people. Remember, we don't want to be just a champion. We want to be an ally. So how do we build that connection? How do we build that relationship with those students, right? And those young people. And, a really quick thing, I was doing a presentation last year and I was telling the story about this student who had reached out to me at 10:30 at night. She texted me and said, hey, we have this issue. I'm really concerned about something a student posted. And that's not even the point of the story. The point of the story is I was telling this and the adults in the room were like, you gave students your cell phone number? Yeah, I did. And I can say pretty much every one of my students has my number. And that's because there is a relationship. There's boundaries, there's expectations, but there's also that relationship. And they know that they can rely on me as their adult ally, as well as I can rely on them. So I'm not just somebody that's like, rah, rah, good job. We're there as an adult ally. And that is so, 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 so important. And again, bring that diversity together. And I know we have Kaylee who's here, who's gonna, she recently graduated last year. She was part of our Jogga Youth Advisory Council, what we also call as YAC. And she was also part of her high school group. And so she's gonna kind of talk about some of these points of, like what got her attention, like what got her involved in youth led, what kept her engaged, what were some of the things that she learned from people that were different from her, as well as like, how did she continue using the skills once she's graduated high school and now she's in college? So we're gonna let Kaylee go ahead and kind of share her story as a young person.
Thanks, Holly. So what got my attention and made me want to join youth-led prevention was that I really wanted to get involved with a group that wasn't directly ran by my own high school. And I definitely mean that in the best way possible because I did love my high school. But I kind of touched on this the last time I got to talk to you, is that at the end of the day, we as students rarely ever had a say-so because our leadership groups were groups that were created by adults, ran by adults, and we were solving problems that the adults wanted us to solve. And, if you've gotten one thing from this already from Jenny and Holly, is that we don't always see eye to eye. And the truth to this is shown in the chat box when Jenny asked you what the most serious problem is among youth. I just want you to think about how much these responses would vary if you asked just a group of students and then just a group of teachers and administrators. And where do you think your responses would relate to the most? And personally, I think the adult allies relate a little bit more to the students, but they also offer that perspective of both. So that's why they're so great. But what made me want to stay engaged was that I was learning more about myself than I really thought I would have in youth-led prevention. I never really practiced problem solving. So having to actually go through the process without being told what to do really pointed out my strengths and weaknesses. For example, I would always come up with really great ideas, but I never really stopped to think about whether they were actually measurable or realistic. And if you know me at all, you know that I'm very, very ambitious. Another thing that I learned is that I'm not very good at delegating. And because I'm overambitious, I always think that I have way more time to do the things that I have to do. And I constantly put stress on myself. And I don't know why I didn't realize it sooner, but until I joined YLP, I always just thought that it was because I was always involved, but really I was just putting so much pressure on myself. And being in Youth Advisory Council really helped me fix some of these weaknesses like this. And I never even knew I struggled with it. So But on the flip side, I also improved upon some skills that I was already thriving at. I learned that I'm very efficient and I'm very thorough and I'm organized and I'm overall pretty good at seeing things through every possible perspective. And this is exactly what I learned from the people that I work with that were not exactly like me. I mean, the value in all these diverse personalities and experiences taught me about embracing different perspectives. And the thing about youth-led prevention is that it's all about the student's perspective. But for the most part, we all had similar ways of thinking about the issues within our schools. Even though we all came from different backgrounds and thought super differently, the bottom line was always the same. But it's crazy thinking back because we definitely learned how to think on a broader scale by the end of the year. In the beginning of the year, when we were asked about how we felt about something within our school, it was the obvious answer that any student would come up with. But by the end of the year, we had a better understanding about the way that we felt and why we felt that way. And we were able to incorporate so many different perspectives in our problem-solving strategies because overall our goal in joining a group like Youth Advisory Council is to be heard. So we understand that empathetic and open-mindedness. I was just amazed at how open-minded everybody was to other ideas, but in reality, it kind of makes sense because every student in that room experienced a time where they didn't really feel like they were being listened to. And that's what's so great about youth-led prevention. But between embracing different perspectives and being realistic about my goals and learning how to better manage my stress has kept me on top of things in college. I mean, in reality, my life as a college student is just one big problem that needs to be solved. So of course I'm still engaged in problem solving, but without all these things that I learned, it's impossible to thrive in college because you never have anybody standing over your shoulder. Everything is on you and there's nobody telling you what to do. And I've heard it, people have told me this so many times and it's so cliche, but it's the truest thing I've ever heard is that you get what you put into it with college. And thankfully, youth-led prevention taught me how to grab opportunities on my own without my hand being held because I see my peers around me all the time struggling with this because in high school, we're never taught how to look beyond the things that are directly handed to us. And in college, you have to be independent. And all of these things I learned in youth-led prevention definitely helped me in that aspect. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Kaylee. I appreciate it. All right. I know we had a lot of information, 45 minutes, and everybody talked really fast, but hopefully you all get the spirit of what we're trying to do. So I'm going to have Holly throw up our last slide. What I hope you do is join us again for Tools of the Trade on May the 29th. And there's also on the slide is going to be the Ohio Youth-Led Prevention email address as well. So please use those, reach out to us, join the RLCs, and hopefully I will see you next time. All right. Have a great day. Bye-bye.